Alexander Spesivtsev is the most famous cannibal maniac in Russia and a homeworker maniac. As in the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers, those of them who kill in their house or apartment are named. In modern Russia, about people go missing every year, including children. They are not found. Listen to a documentary story about a Novokuznetsk pervert in order to know the psychological portrait of a criminal. Perhaps someday it will help save someone's life. Alexander Nikolaevich Spesivtsev was born on March 1, 1970. His father was an alcoholic, and soon Sasha stayed with his mother Lyudmila, who abandoned her husband, and his older sister Nadezhda. They lived in a 3-room apartment on the top floor of a 9-story building in the city of Novokuznetsk, Kemerovo region. Since childhood, Spesivtsev was secretive and vile. In every possible way he did harm in his entrance and at school. After finishing 8 classes, he worked for himself, he repaired equipment, and also stole. His mother and sister were also engaged in theft. He kept a diary, on the pages of which he poured out his complexes, dissatisfaction with himself as a man. He wrote naive poems about his beloved nature, and on the wall in the entrance in black paint, Heil Hitler. In 1988, he first went to a psychiatric hospital for his pranks. Later Spesivtsev married a 17-year-old girl Lavinia, beat her, both at home and in the hospital ward. In 1991, Zhenya died, and even then the future maniac had a chance to go to jail, but he was saved by the lack of evidence of his wife's murder and the presence of mental disorders. The sadistic groom ended up in a special psychiatric hospital in Oral, where he stayed until 1995. Released after 3 years of imprisonment in the hospital, Spesivtsev returned to his apartment, where in 1996 he began to arrange bloody feasts. The cunning mother, under false pretexts, lured the victims into the apartment. Sometimes Spesivtsev's sister helped her, where a maniac with fists and a knife was waiting for them. He slaughtered and dismembered the victims, whose meat was cooked and eaten by Spesivtsev himself, a domestic diver dog, and sometimes by the following victims. The maniac raped girls and women. So in the Spesivtsev's apartment from February to September 1996, at least 4 teenagers aged 10 to 13 and 15 girls and women aged 11 to 40 died. But later, investigators found complete sets of clothes in the apartment that belonged to a much larger number of people, and Spesivtsev himself boasted of murders, which were impossible to prove. Many remains were carried out at night by the mother of the maniac in buckets and thrown away in various places. Here is what the famous professor, Doctor of Law of the All-Russian Research Institute of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Russian Federation Yuri Antonin said about Spesivtsev: "The case with the Spesivtsevs, in my opinion, is unique. Unique because not one person acted, but 3. And in criminal practice, this is in general, a great rarity. And we have to figure out why the killer was helped by the mother and, to some extent, by the sister. She is believed to have witnessed her brother's crimes. In general, according to the rest of the characteristics, Spesivtsev fully fits the image of the sexual killer I spoke about. He is a sexual failure, alienated, lonely, and dissatisfied with being like this. He has a very high degree of vulnerability. This also fully applies to him. The family in which he grew up, was brought up, lived, according to the characteristics of the neighbors, was distinguished by the fact that they were very closed. What does this mean? They were maladjusted, they did not fit into the environment they were supposed to fit into. I think it happened for different reasons. Spesivtsev felt deprived, humiliated, felt that he was treated unfairly, although he could not give himself an answer who cheated him, who hurt him. Nevertheless, he experienced it all. And all the crimes were committed for these very reasons. He was a complete sexual bankrupt, as far as I understood, was impotent, could not have normal sexual relations with women. One of his first novels with his girlfriend Zhenya Kuselnikova fell through. Later she became his first victim. And, like many other sex maniacs, he blamed everything on women, who acted as a formidable and inexorable force, were his personal enemy. In this capacity, they felt women. It is possible that his mother and sister were the exception to this total. But I noticed the demonstrated dialogue in the video between the son and the mother. It is not so important what they said, or rather, not only what they said, but let them into their house, did not share anything with anyone. Although it was noticed, somehow someone accidentally entered the apartment to them, and there was perfect cleanliness. This isolation made all three of them extremely close. The whole world lay outside their family. And another important circumstance, they stole, which also brought them closer and isolated. They existed in a different reality, in a different dimension. And that is why their complicity in crimes becomes clear. They had a common secret that united them. It is very difficult to make accusations against them. And do you know why? They will not understand you, and they probably would not understand me, because they speak and think in a different language. During interrogation, Spesivtsev behaved very aggressively, answered questions asked with irritation, and often did not what she was asked about. That is, she did not understand the language in which they spoke to her. Was Spesivtsev sick? Obviously, he had some deviations, which is why he was sent to a psychiatric hospital. But I do not believe that illness, mental or any other disorder, was the reason for the commission of such a monstrous act. Most likely, these disorders only contributed to the commission of crimes. There is an urgent need to subject the mother and daughter to a mental examination, or even an examination. I do not exclude that they would have found frustration. Why did Spesivtsev kill boys too? True, there were significantly fewer of them than girls. As far as other cases allow me to judge, in the person of these boys he committed a kind of symbolic suicide. He killed himself. It was suicide on a psychological level. He undoubtedly had an unhappy childhood, and here he is, killing these boys, as if killing himself every time, dying and thereby getting rid of all the psychotraumatic experiences that he had. And the last moment is cannibalism. It is, however, not very visible. Nevertheless, the mother cooked human flesh. They forced their victims to use this human flesh for food. They fed her to their dog. There are elements of cannibalism here. I think this is due to the fact that these people were, as it were, from another world, living in a different dimension. And our usual moral standards are not suitable for them. Already in June, investigators began to work with the first discovered remains. Various versions emerged. According to one of them, about the abduction of organs for transplantation, a suspect was detained in Togliatti. People who were registered with psychiatrists were also checked, but Spesivtsev was saved from checking by the fact that his documents were delayed in the Oriel hospital, and after returning from it he was not officially registered in Novokuznetsk. He gave him, as is often the case with maniacs, by chance. Due to poor heating, the Spesivtsev's neighbor's granddaughter fell ill, and on October 24, the neighbor called the locksmiths, who, checking the batteries in the entire entrance, reached the maniac's apartment. He did not open the door when he knocked, shouted, "Mom locked me. I am mentally ill." Then climbed out of the window onto the roof and fled. Meanwhile, the locksmiths called the police. The door was opened, and the apartment was found, a human torso in the bathroom, a woman's head with a face distorted from tying horror in a linen tank, parts of a child's body in a bucket, a blackened child's head on the floor. In the room was a half-dead 15-year-old girl, one of 3 friends who had disappeared a month earlier. These were the last victims of Spesivtsev. The girl was wounded with a knife. The maniac did not manage to kill her, but she died 3 days later. Then, near his house, Spesivtsev was detained. Officially, he was charged with 5 murders, although the remains of 9 victims, many outside the apartment, were found. The remains of 10 more were not found. For one murder, Spesivtsev was found sane, and he was threatened with execution, but the case was delayed by psychiatrists from the Serbsky Institute in Moscow, and then a moratorium on the death penalty arrived, and Spesivtsev again ended up in a psychiatric hospital, until the aggressive state was removed. 10 years have passed since then. A documentary film was made about Spesivtsev in the cycle, Criminal Russia, valuable for the footage of the interrogations of the maniac, his mother and the last victim. At the moment, the apartment of death is sealed. The killer's sister lives in Novokuznetsk in a rented apartment. The mother is serving a sentence of 15 years in prison in the Marinsky women's colony. Spesivtsev himself is in a special hospital in the city of Kamyshin, Volgograd region, from where, according to rumors, he may come out in the near future, which the sister and mother are incredibly happy about in their letters. In a mental hospital, he receives a pension, which he spends on sneakers, and saves money for a music center. At home he loved to listen to loud music at night, writes poetry again, and even took up a novel. And once he shouted to the head physician who refused to release him, "You will remember me for the rest of your life, as the whole of Russia remembered." In general, for people like Spesivtsev, separate institutions are needed. What do you, viewers of our channel, think about this in the comments? And also do not forget to share this video on your social networks, press the subscribe button and the bell for notifications about new films. Please switch to other videos that you currently see in the end screens.